For decades, two names have been the instinctive answer whenever someone says the words luxury car. Mercedes-Benz, BMW. They're not the only players. Audi has been standing beside them for years. Porsche dominates its own corner of the market. Range Rover owns a specific kind of prestige. But when the average person imagines a luxury sedan or SUV sitting in their driveway, Mercedes and BMW are usually the first two badges that appear in their mind. Right now, 3 other companies are making enormous bets that could begin changing that instinct. Not 10 years from now. Not in some distant all-electric future. Within the next year or so. But before we go any further, I need to be completely honest about something. None of the 3 cars in this video has fully launched yet. What you're about to hear is a mixture of official announcements, preliminary manufacturer targets, prototype reports, industry sources, and a handful of figures that are still uncertain. I'll tell you which is which as we go. Because in this case, the uncertainty isn't something to hide. It's part of the story. These 3 vehicles don't compete in the same category. One is an electric roadster. One is a 4-door Grand Tour. One is a full-size 3-row SUV. They don't come from the same country, they don't target exactly the same buyer, and they don't even agree on what luxury should feel like. What they share is a willingness to challenge the same idea. That a premium car needs a familiar German badge before buyers will take it seriously. And 2026 is when we begin finding out which of these bets were real. I'm not going to pretend all 3 are equally likely to succeed. They aren't. One may be much further from production than the company originally suggested. One represents a complete reinvention of a historic brand. And one may be dangerous precisely because it doesn't look like a revolution at all. Let's start with the car that might never arrive in the form people were originally promised. This is the Polestar 6. An all-electric roadster based on the Polestar 02 concept revealed in 2022. When the concept first appeared, it looked like the kind of design manufacturers create to attract attention at an auto show before quietly forgetting it ever existed. Low body. Open roof. Minimalist cabin. Supercar proportions. The kind of car that makes people stop scrolling before they even understand what they're looking at. But Polestar said it wasn't just a design exercise. The company announced plans to put it into production. Then it opened reservations for 500 limited LA Concept Edition vehicles. The required reservation deposit was $25,000. And those launch edition allocations sold out. At the time, Polestar was aiming for a 2026 production launch. That date mattered. It transformed the 02 from an impressive concept into something customers believed they could eventually own. But look at Polestar's current corporate materials, and something strange happens. The Polestar 6 is still there. It has not officially been canceled. But the date has disappeared. In the same company documents, other future vehicles have actual target years attached to them. A successor to the Polestar 2 is targeted for 2027. The Polestar 7 is targeted for 2028. The Polestar 6 is simply listed as planned. No year, no quarter, no revised production window. That does not automatically mean the project is dead. Automotive development schedules change constantly. Supply chains change. Battery strategies change. Platforms evolve. Companies reprioritize models based on demand, investment, and financial pressure. A low-volume electric roadster costing around $200,000 was never going to be Polestar's most commercially important product. But when every other major future model receives a target year and one ambitious halo car does not, the project's position clearly becomes more uncertain. Nearer term, higher volume vehicles may now be taking priority. That would make business sense, but it also leaves an obvious question surrounding the approximately 500 launch edition reservation holders. What happens now? The exact reservation terms may vary. The deposits may be refundable. Some buyers may already have withdrawn. Polestar may eventually honor the original edition and pricing when the car reaches production. We simply do not have a newly announced production timeline. And that silence matters more than another acceleration figure, because the original promise was extraordinary. Polestar previously targeted approximately 884 horsepower from a dual motor system. 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 3.2 seconds. A projected starting price near $200,000. An advanced bonded aluminum platform. And a cabin built around extreme Scandinavian minimalism. A tall central display. A small rotary selector. Almost no visible clutter. No excessive switches. No decorative technology pretending to be useful. Just a low electric roadster with enormous power and almost nothing distracting you from the drive. On paper, it remains one of the most desirable cars in this video. It also represents something Polestar desperately needs. A halo vehicle does more than generate direct sales. It gives the rest of a brand's lineup emotional value. Most people will never buy the Roadster, but they may look at a more affordable Polestar differently because the same company built it. That is what the Audi R8 did for Audi. It is what the Lexus LFA eventually did for Lexus. It is what a true performance flagship can do for a brand still trying to define what it means. But a halo car only changes perception if it exists outside a presentation slide. Right now, the Polestar 6 is still planned. The original specifications still sound extraordinary. The design still looks relevant. The reservations proved that buyers were interested. What it no longer has is a public production year. That doesn't make the vehicle irrelevant. It makes it a symbol of something larger. The enormous distance between announcing an ambitious electric car and actually putting one in a customer's garage. But a missing date is not the biggest gamble in this video. Because the next company isn't merely risking a production schedule. It is risking the entire reason people used to buy its cars. This is the Jaguar Type 01. The name is not an insider nickname or an unofficial code discovered by journalists. Jaguar announced it as the production name of the first vehicle from the brand's new electric era. To understand why this car matters, we need to go back to December 2024. That was when Jaguar revealed the Type 00 concept. It was long, low, and almost architectural. A two-door show car with dramatic proportions, butterfly-style doors, and a design language that seemed deliberately disconnected from almost every Jaguar that came before it. The reaction was immediate. Some people thought it was bold. Some thought it was beautiful. Others thought Jaguar had completely lost its identity. There was almost no neutral response. And that appeared to be the point. Jaguar's new message was copy nothing. The brand was not trying to quietly modernize an existing sedan or replace an old SUV with a safer electric version. It was attempting a total reset. Jaguar also made it clear that the Type 00 itself was not the production vehicle. It was a statement of design and technology. The car customers will eventually receive is a four-door electric Grand Tourer. That production vehicle is now called the Type 01. Jaguar's explanation of the name is straightforward. The 0 represents electric propulsion and zero tailpipe emissions. The 1 identifies the first production vehicle of the brand's new era. Jaguar has also released preliminary engineering and performance targets. The company is developing a tri-motor, all-wheel drive powertrain expected to produce more than 986 horsepower. Torque is targeted at approximately 959 pound-feet. The vehicle uses an 850-volt electrical architecture. Jaguar has discussed a battery pack of roughly 120 kilowatt hours, divided between the front and rear sections of the platform. That unusual battery layout is important. Instead of placing one thick battery slab beneath the entire cabin, separating the modules helps lower the seating position. It allows the roofline and body to remain lower. That matters in a grand tourer designed to feel more like an exotic luxury car than a tall electric sedan. Jaguar is targeting charging speeds of up to approximately 350 kilowatts. The company has also discussed more than 400 miles of potential EPA range and close to 480 miles under the more generous WLTP cycle. Those are still targets. They are not final, independently tested production numbers. A lot can change between a development vehicle and the car eventually delivered to customers. Battery capacity can change. Software can change. Wheel choices can reduce range. Production weight can increase. But the targets reveal how serious Jaguar is trying to be. This is not supposed to be a style experiment with average performance underneath. The company is attempting to combine ultra-luxury design, supercar power, and long-distance electric range in the same vehicle. There is another unusual detail repeatedly mentioned by journalists who have experienced early prototypes. The car may not have a conventional rear window. Instead, the driver would rely heavily on cameras and digital displays. That will sound futuristic to some buyers and unnecessarily complicated to others, which is a perfect summary of the entire car. Camouflaged Type 01 prototypes appeared publicly during the Monaco Formula E weekend in May 2026. Jaguar has said the complete production design will be shown later in the year. Customer deliveries are expected afterward, likely around 2027. Final pricing has not been announced. Early estimates generally place it somewhere around $130,000 to $165,000, depending on market and specification. That puts the Type 01 into extremely dangerous territory. At that price, buyers do not judge a car only by horsepower and range. They judge the brand. They judge the interior materials. They judge dealership treatment. They judge resale expectations. They judge reliability. And, most importantly, they judge whether the vehicle makes them feel more confident or more uncertain about spending that amount of money. The Type 01 will inevitably be measured against vehicles such as the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT. It may also be discussed alongside the much more expensive Rolls-Royce Spectre. Those cars are not direct equivalents. But Jaguar is asking to be taken seriously at the highest end of electric luxury, where reputation becomes as valuable as engineering. Porsche has decades of continuous performance credibility. Rolls-Royce has one of the strongest prestige identities in the world. Jaguar is entering the same conversation after temporarily abandoning much of the lineup buyers already recognized. And then another complication appeared. Range Rover, Jaguar's sister brand inside JLR, introduced a new electric GT positioned as a lower, more road-focused addition to the Range Rover family. It uses the EMA architecture rather than Jaguar's own platform. It is not necessarily a direct rival to the Type 01. Its proportions, driving mission, and brand identity remain different. But both vehicles are aimed at wealthy buyers searching for a modern British interpretation of electric luxury. They may arrive during a similar period. And the Range Rover badge will probably feel more familiar to existing luxury SUV customers than Jaguar's completely new identity. Early coverage has already drawn comparisons between the two vehicles' low, minimalist, and highly modern luxury positioning. That creates an unusual situation. Jaguar is attempting to persuade buyers that its radical reinvention is the future. At the same time, another brand inside the same corporate group may offer a more familiar route into a similar price and technology class. That doesn't necessarily mean JLR is intentionally hedging against Jaguar. Large automotive groups frequently develop overlapping products. Different teams can target similar buyers without one model being designed as protection against another. but the commercial effect could still be the same. A customer attracted to the technology but nervous about Jaguar's new identity may have another option inside the same corporate family. That makes the Type 01's challenge even harder. It is competing against Mercedes. It is competing against Porsche. It is competing against the expectations attached to cars costing well over $100,000. And it may be competing for attention inside its own showroom group. This is what makes the Jaguar the most dramatic bet in the video. The company did not simply create another luxury electric car. It stopped protecting the identity people already understood. It replaced familiarity with confrontation. That may be exactly what Jaguar needed. A safe electric sedan wearing an old Jaguar face might have disappeared into the market. The Type 01 will not disappear. People will discuss it. They will argue about it. They will either reject it immediately or become fascinated by it. But attention does not automatically become sales. A design can dominate social media and still struggle in showrooms. A powerful prototype can impress journalists and still arrive too late. A historic badge can inspire nostalgia without convincing buyers to accept a completely new product. Jaguar has succeeded in making the Type 01 impossible to ignore. The next step is proving that people want to own it. And yet, the loudest car in this video may not be the one Mercedes and BMW should fear most. Because the most dangerous challenger is often the one that doesn't ask buyers to become different people before purchasing it. This is the Genesis GV90, a full-size, 3-row electric SUV expected to become the flagship of Hyundai Motor Group's luxury brand. Of the 3 cars in this video, the GV90 is the least dramatic in concept. It is not a roofless electric performance car. It is not the visual symbol of a brand burning down its previous identity. It is a large, comfortable, expensive SUV. And that is precisely why it may matter more. Genesis has spent the last several years building credibility through a relatively simple strategy. Offer distinctive design. Include more equipment as standard. Price the car below similarly equipped German rivals. Then gradually improve the quality, dealership experience, and brand recognition until the lower price no longer makes the vehicle feel like a compromise. Look at the current Genesis G80. Depending on the market and configuration, it offers electronically controlled suspension with road preview, extensive driver assistance technology, high-grade interior materials, and comfort equipment that German manufacturers frequently divide across option packages. The exact configurations are not identical. Equipment varies by country and trim, but the broader pattern is clear. Genesis often includes technology and comfort features earlier in the pricing structure than Mercedes and BMW. That does not automatically make Genesis better. German competitors still offer advantages in areas such as powertrain variety, established service networks, resale familiarity, chassis tuning, and badge recognition. But it changes the comparison. The customer is no longer deciding between a German luxury car and a clearly cheaper alternative. The customer is deciding whether the badge is worth paying extra for after examining 2 increasingly comparable vehicles. The GV90 applies that strategy to one of the most strategically important parts of the luxury market. A full-size, 3-row SUV. A vehicle designed for families, executives, and buyers who want luxury without giving up space. Genesis has not yet released a complete production specification sheet. There is no final public price. The company has not personally confirmed every detail being circulated through automotive reports. The current information comes from the Neolun concept, prototype sightings, supplier reports, and industry publications. Multiple outlets have reported that Genesis is targeting September 9, 2026 for the GV90's public debut. Until Genesis publishes the final event details directly, that date should be treated as the current target rather than an immovable deadline. Reports also suggest the internal schedule may still be under adjustment. The GV90 is expected to use Hyundai Motor Group's next-generation EM electric platform, replacing or advancing beyond the current eGMP architecture. The platform is being developed to improve efficiency, range, and flexibility across future electric vehicles. The production SUV is expected to use a battery larger than 100 kilowatt-hours. Exact capacity, driving range, and power output remain uncertain. The most visually interesting feature may be the door design. The Neolun concept used large pillarless coach doors. Rear doors opened backward, creating a wide, unobstructed entrance to the cabin. That is exactly the kind of feature manufacturers frequently remove before production. Coach doors create structural challenges. They complicate crash protection. They can add weight. They require stronger body engineering. They can create sealing and durability problems. And the missing central pillar can make mass production significantly more expensive. But prototype photographs suggest Genesis may still be testing a version of that system. That does not prove the final production SUV will keep the full concept arrangement. Camouflage can hide conventional structures. Test vehicles do not always represent final trim. But the possibility matters because Genesis needs the GV90 to feel like more than a larger GV80. It needs a flagship feature. Something immediately recognizable. Something buyers remember after seeing the vehicle once. The cabin is expected to focus on space, quietness, and craftsmanship rather than a dashboard overloaded with separate displays. The Neolun concept emphasized lounge-like seating, premium materials, and a simplified interior. Genesis will almost certainly change parts of that design for production. But the broader intention is clear. The GV90 is meant to compete on comfort, not merely on acceleration. Price estimates currently place the entry point near $100,000. Higher configurations may reach approximately $120,000 to $130,000. Those figures remain unofficial. But if Genesis enters near that level, the GV90 could start below some versions of the Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV, depending on final equipment and market pricing. BMW's future three-row electric flagship is more difficult to compare. Its final name, specifications, and pricing have not yet been fully established. So any exact GV90 versus BMW price comparison would be premature. The Mercedes comparison is easier because the EQS SUV already exists. But even there, the final equipment lists matter. A vehicle with a lower base price can become more expensive after options. A more expensive model may include features the cheaper one does not offer. We will need final GV90 pricing before declaring it a better value. What we can evaluate is Genesis's existing behavior. Across models such as the G80 and GV80, the brand has repeatedly used generous standard equipment as a tool against German competitors. If the GV90 follows that pattern, its strongest argument will not be that it costs dramatically less. Its strongest argument will be that the buyer may need fewer expensive packages to reach the specification they actually want. Genesis also enters this launch with more credibility than it had 5 years ago. The brand achieved record United States sales in 2025. It also ranked second among premium brands in J.D. Power's 2026 Initial Quality Study, based on problems owners reported during the first 90 days. That does not prove long-term reliability. It does not tell us how the cars will perform after 5 or 10 years. And initial quality is not the same thing as total build quality or durability. But it weakens the old argument that choosing Genesis automatically means accepting a lower quality new car experience. For a flagship SUV buyer, that matters. Most customers in this segment will never use the maximum horsepower. They may never test the full top speed. but they will interact with the seats, screens, suspension, climate control, and interior materials every day. They will notice whether the vehicle feels quiet. They will notice whether the doors close properly. They will notice whether the software creates frustration. They will notice whether the dealer treats them like someone who purchased a $100,000 car. That is where Genesis still has to prove itself. The product may be competitive. The dealership and ownership ecosystem must feel equally premium. Mercedes and BMW have decades of global infrastructure behind them. Genesis cannot erase that advantage with massaging seats or a longer equipment list. But it does not need to erase the advantage immediately. It only needs to make buyers hesitate. Imagine someone shopping for a large electric luxury SUV. They enter the Mercedes dealership already expecting to buy an EQS SUV. Then they see a Genesis offering similar space, a distinctive interior, unusual coach-style doors, advanced suspension, and more equipment included near the starting price. The buyer may still choose the Mercedes. But now, the decision requires justification. Why does this option cost extra? Why is that technology locked behind another package? Why does the Genesis appear to include something standard that the German model treats as an upgrade? The more often buyers ask those questions, the weaker the badge becomes as the entire argument. That is why the GV90 may be the most serious threat in this video. It does not need buyers to love a radical new design. It does not need them to trust an uncertain production timeline. It does not need them to believe an old brand has successfully reinvented itself. It only needs them to compare the equipment list. So which one wins? The Jaguar is the most dramatic. It represents a historic manufacturer publicly abandoning the safety of its old identity and betting on a completely new vision of luxury. If the Type 01 succeeds, Jaguar could become culturally relevant again almost overnight. If it fails, the failure will be impossible to hide. The Polestar is the most desirable on paper. A low, open-top electric roadster with nearly 900 horsepower is exactly the kind of vehicle that can transform how people see a brand. But until Polestar attaches a new production date to it, the car remains a promise rather than an approaching product. The Genesis is the least theatrical. It is also the one Mercedes and BMW should probably take most seriously, because both the Jaguar and the Polestar require buyers to take a leap. The Jaguar asks them to trust a completely reinvented identity. The Polestar asks them to stay interested in a car without a current production year. The Genesis asks for something far smaller. Read the specification sheet. Compare the standard equipment. Sit inside the vehicle. Then decide whether the German badge is still worth the difference. Genesis does not need to destroy Mercedes or BMW. It does not even need to outsell them immediately. It only needs to break the automatic connection between luxury and German. Once buyers begin believing that a Korean flagship belongs in the same conversation, it becomes very difficult to make them forget it. 3 brands. 3 completely different bets. One car may never arrive as originally promised. One could either rescue or permanently confuse a historic name. And one may quietly change what buyers expect to receive for their money. 2026 is not necessarily the year Mercedes and BMW lose control of the luxury market, but it may be the year their challengers stop asking for permission to enter it. And the moment that shift becomes impossible to ignore, that is a story for another video.